Hey, boys and girls, welcome back. Miss Deanie here. Today is Friday, and we are actually starting a new chapter. Now, I know that you guys didn't get your chapter 9 books from school, but what we're going to do is I'm going to still be doing the same content as if we moved on in the next chapter, but you would just make sure you take notes. Just like you should be doing all along, take notes with me, pause the videos, and then you'll have an assignment with me, whether it's a Google form, a Flipgrid, or a slideshow. So just same thing that we've been doing. We're just moving on to the next chapter, but you guys don't have your books at home, but that's okay because we'll do it from here. Okay, so this chapter is chapter 9, and it is relating fractions to decimals. So fractions and decimals work together because they are parts of a whole. So we're going to go and take a look at the new vocabulary. Some of it is you've seen before, and then some of it may be new for you. Okay, so we have the word compare, decimal, equivalent decimals, decimal point, equivalent fractions, which we've seen, hundredth, whole, which we've seen, and tenth. All right, so let's take a look. I'm going to zoom this in. Okay, so let's take a look at these ones here first. Okay, so a number with one or more digits to the right of the decimal point is a decimal. And here are some examples of decimals. So it's not quite a whole number yet, okay? So we have, these are all decimals, okay? This one actually would be 12 wholes and then some decimals, but we're going to talk about how they relate to each other with fractions. This is, you're comparing two numbers. So to describe whether numbers are equal to, less than, or greater than each other. Okay. So you could use a hundredths chart, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to do that throughout this chapter, comparing numbers. If you take a look here, we have two or more decimals that name the same amount. They are equivalent decimals, just like how we have fractions where they name the same amount. Decimals can do that as well. And you can look here. You have 8 tenths, and then we have 80 hundredths, and we're going to talk about why they are equivalent throughout this chapter. So this is just to get our minds going with some of the new vocabulary. And then a decimal point is a symbol that's used to separate dollars from cents in money amounts, and to separate the ones and the tenths place in a decimal. Notice I said tenths place, not tens place, tenths, and we're going to talk about that. Then we have one of 100 equal parts is a hundredth. 100th is one of 100 equal parts. So that one little tiny one is one out of 100, right? Out of 100 pieces, 100th. Two or more fractions that name the same amount are equivalent fractions. We've seen that in the previous chapters. We have all of the parts of a shape or a group is one whole, right? You have everything here shaded for you, so it's one whole. Okay, and then we have here, we're talking in tenths. So we have our tenths pieces, right? And one piece out of 10 is 1/10. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot more with vocabulary as we move on. Some you know, some you'll learn. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to jump right into the lesson. So we went over a little bit of the vocabulary. Now we're going to jump into the lesson. It's 9.1. Okay, so we're going to see how we relate tenths with decimals. Okay, so we know fractions with tenths, and now we're going to see how we can use those to relate that to a decimal. Okay, so here's a problem here. It says Ty is reading a book about metaphoric rocks. He has read 7/10 of the book. So 7 out of 10 parts of the book. What decimal describes the part of the book that Ty has read? So a decimal is a number with one or more digits to the right of the decimal point. And we'll talk about that with a place value chart. And a decimal point is where it like separates it. You can write tenths and hundredths as fractions or decimals. Okay, so there is a picture for it. One way we could do it, I actually did it on the board behind me. So we will put it to the board. Let's take a look. Okay. Move this back a bit so you guys can still see it. Okay, so one way that we can do it is by using a model and a hundredths place value chart. Okay, so we could talk how fractions and decimals relate to each other, go together hand in hand. Okay, so if you take a look, they were saying that Ty is reading, he's read 7/10 of the book. So 7 parts out of 10 parts of the book. So we would write it as a fraction 7/10, right? And as a model, here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces. And you guys know we've done this. You would shade 7 pieces out of the 10. So I'm going to shade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? So 7 out of 10, 7/10, right? So the way you would, and I'm going to push this down a little bit, you would read it as 7/10. And the way we would write it, which we've done, you guys even did this, similar things like this last year, you would just write the fraction as 7/10. Can you see that? 7/10. Okay? Now, the way to do it with decimals, you would use a place value chart, okay? And we had this place value chart in class up in the corner, and we only talked whole numbers. And I said, we will get over to that other side on the right with decimals. So here we are, we're here. So how you would write a decimal, you could 7/10 is the same as saying 7/10. Now, did I shade anything out of it completely, a hole? No. So there is no holes, so no 1 holes, so that's 0. And we have tenths, we shaded 7/10. Okay? It goes tenths and then hundredths. We're not doing anything with hundredths today. So 7, and it's in the tenths place. So if I kept going with my place value chart, it would be like ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, and so on that way, right? And then this way, we're only in 4th grade going to worry about the 2 places over from our decimal point, the tenths and then the hundredths. Okay, so just for today's lesson, we are only working with the tenths place. And make sure you hear I'm saying tenths with that TH at the end. Okay, because it's not tens place, right? Okay, so that would be how it looks. How we would write it would be just like this. We would have the 0, our decimal point, and 7 because it's in the tenths place. And how we would read it would be the same way we read it over here. It would still be read 7/10. Okay? Don't say 0.7. No. So it's in the tenths place. There's a 7 and that's it. So it's 7/10. Okay? So we have it as a fraction and as a decimal. Let's pause this and I'm going to show you a few other ways. Okay, now I'm going to show you another way. So I just showed you how to use models and place value charts. Now I'm going to show you another way with a number line. So let's look over here. So here I have my number line. We've talked number lines with fractions already, and I colored 7/10 a different color because that was how much Ty read of his book so far. Okay, so we have 0/10 all the way to 10/10, which is also the same as 1 whole, right? Okay, and that is why down here we're going to work with our decimals now. Okay, so we have 0/10. Here is 1/10 because think about when I was showing you before, ones, tens, hundreds, and so on with that way. We have our decimal point and everything to the right. We have the tenths and then hundredths and so on. Okay, so we have 1/10, 2/10. It's like this. Then we would go with 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, because it's in the tenths place. Okay, here's where Ty read is 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and then 10/10 would be that one whole. I kind of wrote over it a little bit, but the one whole and 0 other tenths. Okay. All right. So how you would say that, you would do, okay, right up here. Yep. 7/10 is the same as 7/10 as a fraction. That's the decimal way. That is the fraction way. Okay. Okay, let's try one more. Tara rode her bike for 1 6/10 mile. What decimal describes how far she rode her bike? You can always, you have already written a fraction as a decimal. You can also write it as a mixed number as a decimal. So let's take a look. I made it bigger on the board. So let's see over here. So we have, she rode her bike 1 whole mile and 6/10 more. Okay, so 1 6/10. So if you look here, I cut up my pieces. They're not exactly even. Sorry, but I promise they should be together, and it is tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so 1 whole, if we're talking tenths, is how many? 10/10. So I'm going to shade this entire thing. 10/10. Okay, is the 1 whole, and then 6/10 from this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, can you see? Okay. Okay, so I shaded 1 whole thing and 6 out of the 10, 6/10 of the other. So that's 1 whole and 6/10. Now, if I was going to make it as a decimal, we have our 1 whole in our ones place, 1 whole. We have our decimal point and 6/10, 6 in our tenths place. And that is it. 1 whole and 6/10, showing it as a model. 1 whole and 6/10, showing it with our place value. So the way you would read it would be 1 6/10. The way you would write it for fraction would be 1 6/10. And the way you would write it for a decimal would be 1 6/10. Okay, hope that helps. We will do one other way how we could do this with a number line. Let me just pause it. Okay, last part I'm going to do. So the other way you could do it, like I said it before with the other problem, was with a number line. So here I made our number line. This is as if it was after 1 whole. So 1 0/10 is just 1 whole, which is also how you would write it for the decimal. Then you have 1 1/10, 1 2/10, 1 3/10, 1 4/10, and so on until you get 1 9/10, and then 1 10/10. But 1 10/10 is actually 2, right? Because 10/10 is 1 whole, and then we have 1 whole plus 1 whole is 2 wholes. And that's where you can see the decimal here. Now, how we would write the decimals with mixed numbers, we have the 1 whole and 1/10, okay? Because it's in the 1 whole is the ones place. 1 whole and 2/10, 1 whole and 3/10, 1 4/10, 1 5/10. Notice when I'm saying end is that decimal point. 1 6/10, 1 7/10, 1 8/10, 1 9/10. And this would be our next number up would be 2. Okay. Try the problems today. Make sure you watch this video through completely. Make sure you have your notes with you. And if you have any other questions, please make sure you ask during our meeting. Okay. I will see you guys.